Thank you all for coming. We're going to get started here in just a minute. So our invitation internally said we started at 11:55, which is already now, but our Facebook, on our private Facebook page said 12. So I want to kind of do an in-between, which is right about right now, 11:57. So as people get joined in, I am going to start by doing a short welcome. And then Millie is with us today. Millie's going to read our land acknowledgement. And then we have a very special treat with our speaker artist today who pre-recorded a short video that we'll watch together. And then we'll have some time for reflections and a little bit of Q&A with our folks. So thank you all. Once again, I'm going to share my screen. Hi, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everyone.
Saul, Ezra, thank you guys. I'm trying to say hello to everybody. So, you know, we have a really flat space here. So we're trying to break through that fourth and fifth wall of interaction. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do a short welcome just by reading a short piece written by Dante Stewart, who is the author of Shoutin' in the Fire, an American Epistle. And as I welcome you all into this digital space and a celebration of Black History Month, I'm going to read a short section that he wrote recently. He said, Black history is not simply asking, how can I remember and learn about Black people? It is all of us asking, how can we love Black people by seeing them, hearing them, and creating a world where Black people feel seen, inspired, and protected. He continues, there are those who seem to think our lives are just lessons, somehow reducing us to helping white people to, quote, get it, end quote. My mind cannot escape the simple fact that so many people ran to our books and our art or to the streets in 2020, believing that simply reading or marching would somehow magically change the white supremacist power structure so pervasive in our country without fundamental change in how we live together. Just 2 years later, after all the anti-racist work and organizing, we are dealing once again with a white backlash on one hand and exhaustion on the other. Some want us erased, others want to control us. He concludes, this misses the power of our living. We neither must be perfect or in performance to stay alive. We neither must be exceptional or superhuman. None of that is necessary. The power is that we are here, and to use Baldwin's often missed words at the end of Letter from a Region in My Mind, we are indeed beautiful. So to celebrate Black History Month, I invite us all in this space to center and uphold the beauty and the ordinary, the extraordinary and the everyday life, the history, the now, and our connected and collective futures of Black lives and Black life. Welcome. I invite Millie to take the stand and do our land acknowledgement.
Hi, thank you. So Heritage University occupies its home on the traditional lands of the Yakima people, these ancestral homelands. And I would like to be respectful with the correct pronunciation of these traditional tribal names. So I'm going to give you a minute to read these names. So these tribes who today are represented by the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation with the Treaty of 1855, and whose relationship with this land continues to this day. Heritage University, grounded in the vision of the two Yakima women founders, respects Indigenous peoples as traditional guardians of the lands and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. We offer the gratitude for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the opportunity to study, learn, work, and be in community on this land. We acknowledge that our university's history, like many others, is fundamentally tied to the first colonial developments in the Yakima Valley. Finally, we respectfully acknowledge and honor past, present, and future Indigenous students who will journey through this home called Heritage University.
Thank you, Millie. And at this time, I'm going to do a labor acknowledgement. We must acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development throughout history and across time, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants who suffered the horror of the transatlantic trafficking of their people, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we must acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today. That labor acknowledgement was written by Dr. T.J. Stewart, and I add, we acknowledge the labor that has shaped the Yakima Reservation to the rich agricultural landscape that it is today. That is the labor done by Indigenous, Black, Brown, immigrants, men, women, children, and families. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Sloniker.
Thank you. I'm really excited for today's event, which has been the work of a community of people. And I want to begin by just making what I imagine is probably considered a truism among people who are here. And that's the observation that in the annals of American oratory and speech making, Black voices play an enormously influential and important role. If we were to list those speeches from the past of our nation that stand out as being widely known and lines that are widely respoken, the voices of Black Americans, I think, are going to be central. We have Sojourner Truth's and Ain't I a Woman speech. Even though it's not considered politically sound today, generally, Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Exposition Address. Martin Luther King, we could list any number of speeches, from his I Have a Dream to his mountaintop speech. I would throw in his letter from Birmingham jail as an example of oratory. Fannie Lou Hamer's speech at the Democratic National Convention in 1964, or Barbara Jordan's speech in the 1976 Democratic National Convention. Malcolm X's Ballad or the Bullet speech. All of these are foundational to the history of American oratory. As I was thinking about today's event, I was wondering, what is it about Black speech that makes it play such an enormous role in the history of our nation? I think it's twofold. One of them is that Black oratory is so frequently founded on the reality of suffering, right? And it is also, in general, simultaneously founded on an invitation to work and to labor for a more just future. And I think these same elements that make Black oratory in the past so important and moving make those same things or make the speeches, when they are re-spoken in today's world, as being especially meaningful. So I want to talk quickly about my experience of re-speaking. I first encountered this concept of re-speaking today, speeches from our past, in reading James Meyer's recent book called The Art of Return. This is a book about the ways in which artists have echoed important themes from the American 1960s in the present, as a way of re-experiencing the American 60s through memory and through collective memory. And one section of that book is about re-speaking, which is the basic idea of having people in the present re-speak and re-perform speeches from our past as a way of understanding both that distant past and as a way of echoing important new understandings about our present moment. And I think one of the aspects of re-speaking that is so compelling is that in listening to speeches that were written and grounded in specific past historical moments, elements of those speeches are going to seem really old, and elements of those speeches are going to seem really, really present and current today. And that's what I'm hoping that our experience of re-speaking from the Black oratorical tradition over the next hour is going to be for us. that we will see in these speeches and in these documents and in these performances elements that seem foreign and distant in past, and other elements of these speeches that seem incredibly present, either in really inspiring ways or in really saddening ways. And I think that that connects to those two themes that I mentioned, the persistence of Black suffering in this nation and the persistent call from Black people, the persistent invitation to work and to labor collectively for justice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Slonaker. Our Respeak artists are Michaela Dodson-Dance, Courtney Hernandez, Aiden Hunter, and Adriana Morfin, who are all with us today. But before we give them an opportunity to share with us live, we're going to show a video of their Respeaking performances.
Since loving is about knowing, we have more meaningful love relationships when we know each other, and it takes time to know each other.
In a strange house, a strange bed, in a strange town, a very strange me is waiting for you now. It is very early in the morning, the silence is loud, the baby is walking about with his foaming bottle, making strange sounds and deciding, after all, to be my friend. You arrived tonight. How dull time is, how empty. And yet, since I'm sitting here, lying here, walking up and down here, waiting, I see that time's cruel ability to make one wait is time's reality. I see your hair, which I call red. I lie here in this bed. Someone teased me once, a friend of ours, saying that I saw your red hair because I was not thinking of the hair on your head. Someone also told me a long time ago, my father said to me, "It is a terrible thing, son, to fall into the hands of the living God." Now, I know what he was saying. I could not have seen red before finding myself in this waiting bed, nor had my naked eye suggested that color was created by the light falling now on me in this strange bed, waiting where no one has ever rested. The streets, I observe, are wintry. It feels like snow, startling circle in the sky, conspiring together and alone, unspeakable journeys into and out of the light. I know I will see you tonight, and snow may fall, enough to freeze our tongues and scald our eyes. We may never be found again. Just as the birds above our heads circling are singing, knowing that in what lies before them, the always unknown passage, wind, water, air, the falling light, the failing night, the blinding sun, they must get the journey done. Listen, they have wings and voices are making, choices are using what they have. They are aware that on long journeys each bears with other, whirring, stirring, love occurring in the middle of the terrifying air. Thank you.
Never forget that justice is what love looks like in public.
The 60s were characterized by a heady belief in instantaneous solutions. They were vital years of awakening, of pride, and of error. The civil rights and Black Power movements rekindled possibilities for disenfranchised groups within this nation. Even though we fought common enemies, at times the lure of individual solutions made us careless of each other. Sometimes we could not bear the face of each other's differences because of what we feared those differences might say about ourselves. As if everybody can't eventually be too Black, too white, too man, too woman. But any future vision which can encompass all of us by definition must be complex and expanding, not easy to achieve. The answer to cold is heat. The answer to hunger is food. But there is no simple monolithic solution to racism, to sexism, to homophobia. There is only the conscious focusing within each of my days to move against them, wherever I come up against these particular manifestations of the same disease. By seeing who the we is, we learn to use our energies within greater precision against our enemies rather than against ourselves. In the 60s, white America, racist and liberal alike, was more than pleased to sit back a spectator while black militant fought black Muslim. Black nationalists badmouthed the nonviolent. And black women were told that our only useful position in the Black Power movement was prone. The existence of black, lesbian, and gay people were not even allowed to cross the public consciousness of black America. We know in the 1980s from documents gained through the Freedom of Information Act that the FBI and CIA used our intolerance of difference to foment confusion and tragedy in segment after segment of black communities in the 60s. Black was beautiful, but still suspect. And too often, our forums for debate became stages for playing who's blacker than who or who's poorer than who games, ones in which there can be no winners. The 60s for me was a time of promise and excitement, but the 60s was also a time of isolation and frustration within. It often felt like I was working and raising my children in a vacuum and that it was my own fault. If I was only blacker, things would be fine. It was a time of much wasted energy, and I was often in a lot of pain. Either I denied or chose between various aspects of my identity, or my work and my blackness would be unacceptable. As a black lesbian mother in an interracial marriage, there was usually some part of me guaranteed to offend everybody's comfortable prejudices of who I should be. That is how I learned that if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. My poetry, my life, my work, my energies for struggle were not acceptable unless I pretended to match somebody else's norm. I learned that not only couldn't I succeed at that game, but the energy needed for that masquerade would be lost to my work. And there were babies to raise and students to teach. The Vietnam War was escalating. Our cities were burning. More and more of our school kids were nodding out in the halls. Junk was overtaking our streets. We needed articulate power, not conformity. There were other strong black workers whose visions were racked and silenced upon some imagined grid of narrow blackness. Nor were black women immune. At a national meeting of black women for political action, a young civil rights activist who had been beaten and imprisoned in Mississippi only a few years before was trashed and silenced as suspect because of her white husband. Some of us made it and some of us were lost to the struggle. It was a time of great hope and great expectation. It was also a time of great waste. This is history. We do not need to repeat these mistakes in the 80s. The raw energy of black determination released in the 60s powered changes in black awareness and self-concepts and expectations. The energy is still being felt in movements for change among women, other peoples of color, gays, the handicapped, among all the disenfranchised peoples of this society. That is a legacy of the 60s to ourselves and to others. But we must recognize that many of our high expectations of rapid revolutionary change did not in fact occur. And many of the gains that did are even now being dismantled. This is not a reason to despair, nor for rejection of the importance of those years. But we must face with clarity and insight the lesson to be learned from the oversimplification of any struggle for self-awareness and liberation, or we will not rally the force we need to face the multidimensional threats to our survival in the 80s. There is no such thing as a single-issue struggle because we do not live single-issue lives. Malcolm knew this. Martin Luther King Jr. knew this. Our struggles are particular, but we are not alone. We are not perfect, but we are stronger and wiser than the sum of our errors. Black people have been here before us and survived. We can read their lives like signposts on the road and find, as Bernice Reagan says so poignantly, that each one of us is here because somebody before us did something to make it possible. To learn from their mistakes is not to lessen our debt to them, nor to the hard work of becoming ourselves and effective. We lose our history so easily. What is not predigested for us by the New York Times or the Amsterdam News or Time magazine. Maybe because we do not listen to our poets or to our fools. Maybe because we do not listen to our mamas and ourselves. When I hear the deepest truths I speak coming out of my mouth sounding like my mother's, even remembering how I fought against her, I have to reassess both our relationships as well as the sources of my knowing. which is not to say that I have to romanticize my mother in order to appreciate what she gave me. Woman, Black. We do not have to romanticize our past in order to be aware of how it seeds our present. We do not have to suffer the waste of an amnesia that robs us the lessons of the past, rather than permit us to read them with pride, as well as deep understanding. We know what it is to be lied to, and we know how important it is not to lie to ourselves. We are powerful because we have survived, and that is what it is all about, survival and growth.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries? Does my hastiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from the past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I am a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into the daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
We step quick and quietly. Is the journey worth it? We follow, breath stolen and body shook. Our Moses leads us to our freedom. An infant's scream rings out in the desolate night. Opium is shoved in the infant's mouth. The hunters are closing in on us, a gun in our pocket in case of indecision. We run quickly through the underbrush. Our resolve is not swayed. We wade through the river, our hearts heavy, our clothes wet, and freedom in our sights. We continue on our treacherous trek. We rush to a story foretold, to the railroad underground. We are the slaves. Our skin breaks under a cracking whip. We are the slaves, only cattle, only property. We are the slaves, our hands cramped from picking the king crop. We are the slaves, an economic breeding ground. We are the slaves. Our children are never truly ours. We are the slaves. We shape the American dream. We are the slaves. Our songs speak of freedom. We are the slaves. The underground is our song. We are the free men. A number of us escaped our bondage. The ones who grasped the chance. Many failed. Their memories live on. The ones who are never truly seen as free. The Fugitive Slave Act saw to that. We are the free men, kept as cattle. We escaped our saddle. Education is ours to receive. Knowledge is power. We were kept illiterate. Our bodies are packs. The master, our contract. Freedom, our desire. A path had opened. A secret known to all. A network known to few. A myth of a railroad. Our underground freedom.
The moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom. To act in ways that liberate ourselves and others, that action is the testimony of love as the practice of freedom.
So I invite you all just to come back into this space together just for a couple of minutes. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see the squares and look at our chat. And we're going to have an opportunity to ask our speakers to share a little bit, to reflect. But before we do that, I want to take heed to Dr. Sloniker's words that he started us off with today, to think about the words that our artist re-spoke today and how they invoke and evoke things within us in response, and that these words are spoken as an invitation to work, to labor for a more just future. So if we could just think for a moment and use the chat, I invite you to use the chat to share a word, a phrase, a thought, a reflection of the words that were spoken. I'm going to give us about a minute to do that. As you're filling in the chat, I'm going to read some of your words. Amazing presentations. It felt bone deep. Resilience, moving, very moving, impactful, powerful. Resignation, powerful. I rise. We are the slaves. We are the freedom. That's right. Thank you all. I think it's important for us to do this, even though it might seem like an exercise or a performative for us to use the chat and share this way. But I think it's important for us to recognize the power of our own words stitched together with the words that were just spoken. And with that, I want to just give some space for us to hear from our speakers. And Dr. Sloniker and I will kind of take turns dishing you all some questions. This is not a test, so I want you to feel free to share from your heart. And yeah, go ahead, Dr. Sloniker.
Yeah, I'll ask the first question for Adriana and for Aiden. Can you just tell us what it meant for you to get to know the words of these speakers as intimately as you did, and to embody them and push them out into the world? What was it like to read them the first few times? What was it like to find the places that you wanted to emphasize? What was it like to think through your delivery and where you wanted to speed up, or what things you wanted to emphasize or draw attention to?
I can go first, just since Adriana had a couple extra poems, different artists than me. But I feel like it was just a very natural feeling because of just the way that he writes it and the way that he talks. It feels so rhythmic. Just reading it has a lot of beautiful vertical rhythm, and just getting that out, it almost felt like he was like holding my hand saying, this is how, this is the rhythm that you should be doing it with, you know? So that's pretty much how that felt. And obviously I'm not him, so I don't know exactly the rhythm, you know what I'm saying? But it did feel very, very natural. Going from certain parts that feel a little bit more intense rather than parts that feel less intense. Yeah. What connections did each of, I can answer that question. I feel like the way he's talking about is like has to do with a lot of time and waiting and just kind of like being in the moment currently, and like in a place where like you don't want to be in the moment, you know, you're just waiting and waiting and waiting till you have to get out of bed basically. And so I feel like that was that's kind of been my life, just waiting until I get into college and, you know, all that summertime stuff like that. It's just you're waiting. This is kind of ugly, but it's where you are.
And Adriana, same question to you about your experience of inhabiting these words for the first time, and of your experience of the choices you made about delivery and performance.
Yeah, so I first will want to speak on Maya Angelou's I Rise, Still I Rise. The first time that I heard her speak that was in high school. So when this opportunity came to me, it bring back a lot of remembrance for me. But to go through that speech, because the first time that I saw it, it was so extremely powerful for me to hear, and really left like an imprint on me in the way that I move forward in my own life. And so to reread that was extremely emotional, especially, you know, with the last few years that we've all been going through, and just the connection to self and family and community, you know. It was extremely emotional to read through, because throughout her piece, it's so powerful because she continuously finishes each statement with still I rise. I have this resilience, this strength in me. But before those moments of being at the top of the hill and standing tall, it's these moments of having clarity and peace within herself, and saying that, you know, no matter what, I laugh, you know, I laugh and I have joy and I have peace, just like I have gold mines and I have oil, you know, that I own. And, you know, that no matter what you do, no matter in any way that you come to me and you try to tear me down, I continue to, and although she says like, still I rise, I see it as like, I continue to stand. And she doesn't really say that like she's fallen, really. Like she says that like, you know, you attempt and you try and you pry at me, but I stand and I rise, and I stand in love, and I stand in love for myself, you know, and saying that like that she is like sexy within her own self, you know, and she is beauty within her own self, and saying that she stands with those around her. And it's so like intense the way that the speech and the poetry builds, because it starts off kind of lighthearted and saying that if you watch her in her speech and the way that she does it herself, she kind of giggles throughout it, and she's laughing, and she's so expressive in the way that she tells her story. And towards the end, it kind of rushes in, and it bottles up, and it's bottling up into this climax. And that's when it leads to like I am an ocean, I am welling, I'm swelling, I'm growing. She's saying that she is everything. She is all, she is one. For her to speak like on her ancestors or my own Mexican and my indigenous side. So it is extremely deep, and the pieces that I read as well continue to like move forward that idea of being others, and the way that in our family, in our community, in our society, in our public, and just knowing that when we continue to learn about others and continue to be open-hearted in having that space for other people and to listen and not speak, but listen to other people, then we continue to learn, and we let go of that ignorance, we let go of that prejudice, and we grow in our own space, in our own hearts. And like with that, there's so much peace that comes from that. So it was just so beautiful, this whole opportunity. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to speak these words. Is really an honor.
Thank you both so much, Aiden and Adriana, for sharing. We'll come back to you with a couple more questions. I want to move to Michaela, and I'm going to share my screen again. Michaela, your segment is really unique in this set of speeches because this one you wrote. Such a powerful, beautiful poem. If we all could just use our reactions right now and throw up some hearts and some flowers for Michaela sharing that really beautiful, heartfelt work that she produced. So because you wrote this piece really to share with the world, tell us about bringing these words to life. And I'm going to share the speech because I just want you to talk. So let me do that, and then I'll let you take over.
Yeah, so this is my poem. My poem actually is for a project a couple of years ago in high school. It was a project we had to do. And every time I can do a project, if I can do a poem, I'm gonna do a poem. Any type of project, they say, oh, we're gonna do a project, and you can do whatever you want to show your knowledge. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do a poem. And so I follow in my poem. I have two poems put together. Actually, if you look, one part is italicized, and the other part is just a regular font. It's two poems put together. Each poem should be about, each stanza should be about 7 lines, and it's about 7, it's a 7 line for each one. When putting this together, I had like, I just was looking through my notes, and I had like a sheet of facts that I needed to put in here. And so for this poem, it's a historical poem. It's showing history through my poetry, the history of the Underground Railroad, and then the history of kind of what happened after. Just as we ended, as it ends out, it comes after. So when writing this poem, I kind of just followed the myth and like the legend, and then also with other poets kind of, and everybody who writes about the Underground Railroad, it's symbolically an Underground Railroad, but it's also a path. It's usually a path. By Harry Timmons, you took them down through a path and they would do certain things. So that's kind of how I was putting together this poem. When I was writing it, I wanted to incorporate the facts, but I also wanted to incorporate my own voice into it. And so I added 2 poems, and then I just smushed them together. So you can read this, you can just read the first part, and you can read the second part. But when you put them together, they come together really nicely.
Thank you, Michaela. You also mentioned that it was visually, like you thought about this as a visual presentation. So I love just kind of your thinking of how you put these 2 different works together to create one cohesive piece. What are some of the lines or phrases that like stay with you? And if you could tell us, like, what do you hope we gain, we learn, we engage with in your words?
I guess let's see, I think only cattle, only property really hits out. The ones that really were ones that when I was writing, those were ones that I wanted to stand out. Is knowledge is power. You kind of see the way that power is emboldened. We were kept illiterate. And then the ending of each poem, the ending of each part of the poem, we run to a story foretold to the underground. We are the slaves. The underground is our song. And then we have the ending of the last part of the poem is a network known to few, a myth of a railroad, our underground freedom. So each part has underground. So that's like kind of what I want. I'm repeating. That's what kind of want to take in the underground. The underground. What is the underground railroad? What is it to me? What is it to Black people? What is that myth? What is that legend? And how important it is. That's kind of what I wanted to take in.
Thank you, Michaela. I'm going to stop sharing here. And I think it's Dr. Sloniker's turn. Yeah.
Courtney, I have a question for you. I loved how your choice of text connects our present to the 80s, connects the 80s to the 60s, and still deeper histories. It's like a re-speaking and a revisiting within a revisiting. I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about your current work in the community. And then if you could talk about what for you is powerful as a takeaway from the text that you read to us today. And then how do those things connect? How does the past connect to the work that you're doing today?
Okay, thank you. So a little bit about the work I've done in the community. A couple of friends and I decided to basically start up the Black Lives Matter movement in Sela because that's where we're from. And we felt that that was a place around the valley that really, really needed that movement. So we ended up doing our first big rally and march there. Gloria was there. She was one of our speakers. Thank you, Gloria, again. And from that, we had a lot of people that were very unhappy with what we were doing. And in fact, one of them was a city official, the city manager. And so that took things into a whole nother level. We were just trying to bring awareness. And that took things to a whole nother level where we eventually ended up suing the city. And I'm skipping a lot because there's a lot to it, but the good news is we have just settled with the city as of this last month. It took a lot of work, a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears. And I'm really happy. We're all really happy with what came of it. So some of the things I actually had to write them down because there's actually a lot of things that we asked for that we got. So one of the things is that all Sela City employees are going to be taking a diversity, equity, and inclusion training, which is huge. They really need it. So I'm really happy about that. The city is going to be putting $25,000 toward the mural. And we get to help choose the artist and kind of the message. And overall, we just want a message that incorporates like acceptance and diversity. So something like everyone is welcome here, or like, we're glad you're here, things like that, hopefully with like pictures of all kinds of diversity in the background. That's what we're hoping. The city is going to take steps to increase diversity of their hiring practices. So they're going to put, whenever they need to hire someone, they're going to put them on these certain websites, like for people reaching out to people of color. So hopefully we can get some more people of color in the city of Sela working. The mayor has to write a proclamation to the city, basically saying that, well, one part of it that I skipped is we would put out signs like Black Lives Matter signs, and people would steal them. And the city of Sela said that was fine for them to do. And so now part of the settlement is that people are not allowed to do that anymore. And so the mayor is going to put out a proclamation saying you're not to take signs. And also everyone is welcome here in Sela and valued, regardless of race, religion, class, sex, anything like that. So I imagine that she's not super happy about that, but she has to do it. And so I think that's going to make some underrepresented people in Sela feel really happy and kind of seen and represented. And then lastly, my group, Save Sela Alliance for Equality, is going to be getting a pretty large amount of money And we're going to be using that to help underrepresented members of the community. We're still in the works of establishing ourselves as a, I forgot the word, but like an official organization. And from there, we're in talks of hopefully putting out scholarship opportunities for students. That's really what we'd like to do, as well as like support groups for underrepresented people in SELA. People can just come and talk about some of the experiences that they've had that haven't been very well, and we can just kind of be there for each other and talk. Yes, nonprofit, that's what I was looking for. Thank you, Mary. So yeah, things are going really well. Things are going in a positive direction. It's been a very long road. And when me and my friends started this movement, we did not expect any of this to happen. So it's been a lot, but we are very happy with the outcome of it. And I hope that it will make the underrepresented groups in SELA feel a lot more welcomed and accepted. I mean, I grew up there and I was one of the only Black students there. I'm Black and Mexican. So I was friends with everybody, but still it was very difficult to be one of the only ones. And at the time I thought some things happened and people did things just as a joke. But now that I've grown and I'm an adult and I've learned so much, I'm like, okay, wow, microaggression, racism, like everything in the book. So I'm hopeful that those types of things will lessen because of our work in SELA, and hopefully the young kids there and families will feel a lot better and safer living there. And then in terms of the Audre Lorde speech, I thought it was very amazing. I know a lot about her. I learned about her in college, but I've never actually heard of this specific speech. So I really had to read it a lot to kind of get it and get the cadence of how I wanted to do it. But I think I saw a lot of, unfortunately, I saw like a lot of similarities to today. So she talked a ton about how differences were a big component of how people treated each other and interacted. And so like she mentioned, oh, there was a Black woman with a white husband. And so people didn't really want to listen to her, didn't care about what she went through. The lesbian and gay community was like unheard of. That was not even hardly spoken about back then. And just how the world loved to see like Black people going against each other. So like the Black militant versus the Black Muslim, the Black nationalist versus the Black nonviolent. And then how women were not even given much space in these movements. And I think some of those are a big parallel to today. There has been some changes, which is great, but there's a lot of similarities. Another similarity I saw is like through all of our work in the community, sometimes we felt like, are we really making a difference? Like, are we really going to change anyone's mind and heart? Is this just a huge waste of time? And in her speech, she talked about how the 60s were somewhat of a waste. It was a time of great hope and great expectation, but also a time of great waste. And so sometimes it's hard when you're trying to move forward and make changes and you have a lot of people going against you. And you're just like, is this even worth it? But my group and I are proof that it is worth it. You just have to keep going. And so many of these people she named in here are proof of that as well. And then some last couple of things that I really liked in the speech that also kind of go with the work that we're all doing today is that we can't lose our history. It's so easy to lose our history if it's not just put right in there in the newspapers for us or on social media or whatever, but it's our responsibility to do our own learning and keep that in our minds and pass that along to future generations, our kids, our students, our friends, our families. And then also I loved the ending where she says, we are powerful because we survived. And that's what it's all about, is surviving and growth. So if you're doing those two things, like you're on the right track, that's the best you can, that's like what you should be doing. And that's great that you're doing that. And one last thing is that I loved from this is she says, each one of us is here because someone before us made it possible. So through our work that we're all doing, we're making it possible for the future generations to make the world even better than how we have it now. So yeah, I think I answered all those questions. Sorry, I'm a bit long-winded. Always have been. But thank you guys so much. Thank you, Dr. Landry, for inviting me to be a part of this. This is a really, really great event. I haven't seen one like it. So thank you, everybody.
My goodness. Thank you, Courtney. What a pleasure to meet you and to hear about all of your work. I follow the CELA page on Facebook. And so I hear about this, but I didn't know you were the person or one of the people behind this really enormous effort to flip these scripts in CELA in our own hometown. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing. I have one last question, and this is for all of you, for all of our speakers. Just to think about, you know, again, kind of going back to these elements of re-speaking. To me, they remind me of the call and response, right? When I think I've talked a lot about this in other groups, but to think about just the essence of, for me, motherhood is so important in that call and response when there's a call, and how easy it is for even our own bodies to be engaged in response. When I think about, you know, George Floyd calling for his mother, that response, you know, of our communities, our neighbors to respond. So I want you to just think about that, speakers, and help us think, what is it that you hope that we respond to today with the speeches that you gave us? Aiden, Adriana, Michaela, and Courtney, any one of you can give us a short responses. We're almost out of time.
I guess the response to the poem in general is like history, understanding our history and researching it yourself, because that's something that I do. And even within my own poem, my mom is, since I was a kid, has read me. I have a little book right close to where I have the information for this poem. It's about the Underground Railroad. She read that book to me. You know, just having history, not only your own history, but Black history in general, all kinds of history, just understand what's going on within your community and understanding what's going on in other people's community. And not just worrying about yourself, just being there to listen and understand how our history has shaped us and how history does end up repeating itself, or you see similarities within other cultures through history.
Amen to that. Thank you, Michaela. Anybody else want to share? All right, well, now I'm going to ask if you are still thinking of a thought, you want to unmute yourself, you can. I just want to invite our audience, while our speakers are thinking about any last thoughts, just to use the chat again, and just to think about your own call to action and your own response in the moment. You can use one word, you can use a whole phrase or quotes or anything. Just let's fill the chat with some ways that we think we can respond to these re-speaks today.
Yesenia, can I just
oh, sure.
contribute something? So I just wanted to let everybody know, I'm not sure exactly where, I know Davidson's on here, but there is a video. It's about a 20-minute video that's a discussion of a Marina Dingus art piece. She's a Seattle Black artist. And I encourage everyone here who's interested to go see it in person in the Virginia Hislop Gallery. And then there are also art supplies in the Rao building that you can use and create an expressive artwork that's either in dialogue to it or anything else that you wanted to express about what you did today. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We'll hear in a minute from Paul with some other Black History Month events that are happening. Just want to do a last call to Aiden, Adriana, and Courtney in case there were any last words.
Yeah, sure. I feel like it was just important, even though my poem necessarily wasn't like very, I guess like angled towards social justice necessarily, but I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to, you know, like we don't have to be completely like social justice. It's just like living and loving your own work and experiencing and just sharing and just letting people hear. That's how I feel.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that I would like to just add that that would be like sort of my call to action for myself, is just to speak from love and authenticity and self power, and listening and learning from others, and being able to allow others to feel their own power too, and to be empowered.
Beautiful. Thank you. Courtney, any last thoughts? Go ahead.
I think for me, I kind of said mostly what I wanted to say, but I think that a big thing for me is she talks a lot about differences in her speech. And I think kind of a call to action is like, we need to embrace and accept our differences, everyone's differences, and value them. A lot of times people think, oh, differences are a bad thing, but actually they're a really beautiful thing. So just embracing those differences, I think. And I also want to just, again, I want to reiterate, this is a very cool project. I mean, I spent 4 years at UW studying American Ethnic Studies, and we never did anything like this. And I think it was just really empowering and kind of really made you go in that mindset and kind of like pretend that you're that person and think about, oh, what did they go through? How would they say this?
Mm-hmm.
Why does this matter? And so I just want to commend you guys on a really, really great idea, great project.
Thank you, Courtney. With that, I just want to thank you all for coming. I'm going to pass this over to Paul, but I want to thank all the students, the committee that put this together, Dr. Slonaker, who brought these ideas about the Respeak to this space. I want to thank Davidson for putting this beautiful video together, which will be available. We'll share it. And Amy for helping me with the sound, and Gloria and Dr. Dugan for helping with co-hosting today's event. And Paul, I'll hand this on over to you.
Thank you, Yesenia. What I want to thank all of you for participating and just briefly talk about some of the thinking behind this project and the approach to Black History Month. Frequently or typically, these types of events tend to be a sort of one-time thing, the idea of compartmentalizing Black history, Black culture, and contributions to the fabric of American society as a sort of a isolated thing in the month of February. And we decided, and this was a great team event. I appreciate Yesenia and Blake taking the lead as one of the teams for the Respeak project, but there are a number of teams that have been involved. And the idea here and the notion of quote unquote opening dialogues is not the idea of that this is just a one-time event, but that we are basically inviting, evoking, opening a portal for continuing discussion of these issues. And there are multiple projects which you'll get information about and access to for continuing that dialogue. There is, of course, the Respeak project. There's also a project that involves an interview with local community leaders and elders talking about local Black history and culture in the Yakima Valley. There's a team, and Gloria Jones-Dance is taking the lead with respect to that team. There is a project on healthcare and social services in which Lucinda Canty, Maxine Janice, and others, Christine Niarati, are involved in talking about issues of inequity in healthcare for communities of color. There is a recorded panel discussion in which Yesenia Saul-Neely and I discuss critical race theory and the implications of it for education and American society. As Greg Pierce talked about, there's a project involving reactions and reflections and expression with respect to both acquaintance and engagement with Black art. There's a project looking at the intersections, if you will, of Black culture and student life and activities, discussing things like Steppen and Strolin, which evolved as a sort of Black art experience, but has been picked up and by others as a way of reacting to and invoking their own expressions of life and culture. There's a compendium of literature, nonfiction, fiction, and research in a library guide that's available for you to enrich your own understanding. And so there are a variety of these projects, and that's the approach that we took that was different, a very collective team effort to look at the broad context of issues of experience and culture in society, and to continue that discussion going forward throughout the entire year. So I invite you to look into those things, to ask questions, to engage yourself. And finally, I would just like to say, because Aidan's comment resonated with me, and as I tell my students, I'm 4,000 years old, so I've been dealing with this for a long time. But one of my dreams has been that there be no more firsts. That we can arrive at a point where, as a Black person in America, I don't feel the need to pressure, feel the pressure or the need to be the only, as Courtney said, to be the first. It was a bittersweet moment when I was the first Black partner in a major law firm in the state of Minnesota, right? Was it an accomplishment? Yes, but damn it, sorry. Why did I have to be the first? You see, and why was there that pressure? So when we can get to the point where it is part of that we can just be and act, as Audre Lorde said, to take up the call to action and but to be a collective effort, a sort of universal effort. And I want to see that reflected in the Heritage University community, that all aspects of the community can be, that it can be a we, not this group or that group or whatever, but as a community. So I'll leave you with that thought. And like I said, I do hope that we all can take away from this a sense not only of the experience that we've had here, but a motivation to look deeper, to look further, to engage more broadly, and to think about these issues and what they mean for us in our lives.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Landry. Thank you all for coming. It's 1 o'clock. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Stay warm. Blessings. Peace on all of you.